Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon. I am a master life coach, and I am here to share with you the most amazing guests. And I say it every time, but let me tell you, today's guest is really, he embodies everything and the whole reason why I started this podcast is because I want us to feel more like engaged, I think, with one another and to really understand that we're all going through the same stuff and we can help one another. And I think we've evolved from just sort of that therapeutic, let's just talk kind of thing and more let's live it and talk to someone who's lived it and then take the tips of what they've done and how their knowledge and experience can help us. So I just am so excited today. Forgive me if my voice gets a little wonky. I've had bronchitis for going on 3 weeks now, and I'm over it. I'm sick and
Mm.
tired of it. So hopefully it'll behave today, but I'll do my best. So let me tell you about my wonderful guest today. My guest today is Michael Stone. He is a spiritual author, teacher, mentor, shamanic practitioner, radio host, producer, and integration facilitator. He co-creates safe individual and group environments that support people in transcending the myth of separation and experiencing profound interconnection with others and all of life, which is what we were just talking about. He has taught and led
Mhm.
live events, classes, teleseminars, and workshops in organizational development, embodied shamanism, forgive me, moving meditation, mysticism, personal growth, and spiritual fulfillment for over 50 years. Gosh, that all sounds so fun and everything that I soak in. He is the author of Living a Shamanic Way of Life, and he has a newly released book, which I cannot wait to read. And it is called Traumatized, a Love Story, Healing the Wounds that Separate, Alienate, and Marginalize Us. I mean, not only has he had the experience of the learning and the teachings, but wait until you hear the story of his own personal journey through trauma. I mean, I have goosebumps right now, and I fell over when I read what he has been through and what a light he is, and you see him and his smile and his whole aura is just so beautiful. So he did live what he teaches. So without further ado, I'm rambling, but hello, my new friend Michael. How are you today?
I am so great and I'm so excited to be on your show, Maureen. Thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me.
I know our listeners are going to get so much from you, and there are some heavy things we're going to go through first, but we have to do that. We have to tell your whole story so we know where you've been, so we can help the listeners understand how to get through all of that and end up where you are. So we start off, of course, here on Ink with your knee story, meaning we've had many knee stories in our life where we've been on our knees and just felt helpless and hopeless and we just couldn't go on and we didn't have any answers and how do I get through this and what is my purpose here on earth? So I know you have so many. Let's start with a really profound knee story that you've been through.
Mm. Well, just to say, I guess I'm kind of a trauma poster child, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And yeah, I started out really born into war. Both my parents were at Pearl Harbor in the bombing. And they were majorly affected by that. My father was a fighter pilot. They couldn't get any planes off the ground. And my mother was in the Women's Air Force and assistant to the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And as I said, they were both, what used to be called shell shock, PTSD. Now they were heavily impacted by it. So my father was pretty shut down. My mother went through a lot of um, challenges the first 2.5 years of my life. She was delusional, thought I was the enemy, and tried to kill me numerous times. Luckily, she didn't. And then at 2.5, I found my mother hanging. She had hung herself, probably to save me. At least that's how I carry the narrative, particularly now that I've made peace with all of this. So that was the beginning of my story. Then my father, who was shut down with grief and PTSD also, was very absent. He was absent from the very beginning. Wasn't there with my mother at the beginning very often. And so then I had a lot of babysitters and a really horrible stepmother who was an alcoholic, eventually drank herself to death. That only lasted about a year, but it was a pretty challenging year. My father had been married to her before my mother and remarried her. And I'm not sure why he possibly could have thought that was a good idea to drop off the bastard son of the woman who he left her for. It's kind of strange logic, but I had a brother then who I really only knew in that part and then much later in life. And then I had the happiest time probably in my whole life at 5 when he came and took me away from that and all the people I'd stayed with. I was with different families all the time. And he left the Air Force and Army Air Corps, and he bought a bar in San Francisco, Maiden Lane. Bought into it. He was a partner. And so I lived in a bar for a year. And it was really the best year of my life, I think. Everyone was happy and taking care of me. And my father was this dashing, war hero. And so all the women were coming to, you know, having a 5-year-old child in a bar is better than having a dog. You get a lot of attention, right? And the chef took care of me, and it was really a good time. And then he, I don't know how much of my story you want to tell, but there's a lot. And then he sold the bar and upped in the Air Force with a commission and said we're off to New York, and we went there. And then he married a woman who became the ugly stepmother for my entire life, and ended up cutting me out of my will after my father cutting me out of the father's will at the very end. But you have to think of the irony of her maiden name, which I think Dickens would have paid money for this. My stepmother's maiden name was Severe.
Like, you can't make this stuff up, right?
Can't make this stuff up, right?
Oh my
So,
God.
so he married her, and instantly, like 2 weeks after a honeymoon, left me with the woman's parents and went to Japan for 2 years and was stationed over there. So I was dropped off again at another doorstep. So a lot of early trauma and led to, being a brat and literally because when you're in the army, when you're a child of somebody in the military, you're called a brat, and I took that to a high extreme, trying to get noticed, trying to get my father to see me, like many of us, spend a lot of our life, trying to get the love that we just couldn't get. And of course, when I've studied trauma for a long time now, you realize that at those early ages, no matter what's happening, if there's a divorce or your parents are fighting or there's, these challenges that happen, a young child in the developmental stages said, something's wrong, and then it's never something's wrong with my caregivers because my life depends on them. So it's always something's wrong with me. And then we adapt to that. And that's the essence of early childhood development is if we are able to really develop fully, we need to be felt, seen, heard, held, protected by a caring person who looks lovingly into your eyes and you're seen. But when you
Yeah.
don't have that, that's called co-regulation. And if you don't have co-regulation, you don't really learn to regulate your own emotions, your own feelings, your own sensations. And so that's a huge part of development, which much of the work I do with people is around helping people to uh, uh, really be seen and felt and heard. And so that's why I do the trauma circles, because most of us were wounded in relationship. And so, to have a group, my groups are usually 12 to 18 people and they last 4 to 6 months. So they're very, very deep dive into getting to know each other in a very safe space, which
Yeah.
people really thrive in. Because when one person says, I never felt loved, and then five other people go, I never felt loved either, or, I always thought I was stupid, and I always thought I was stupid too. And then you go, oh, wait, this is not a problem here. This is a belief that I made up in order to adapt to the trauma. Because
Right. Right.
because when you to get to know trauma is to understand trauma is the most misdiagnosed, misunderstood source of suffering on the planet. I mean, on the planet. And you look at everything that's happening, war, racism, greed, capitalism gone astray, climate change. At the heart of everything is this trauma, because trauma creates separation. And so there's a fragmentation of who I am.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a and it's an intelligence. The nervous system is so amazing. It's been evolving for hundreds of thousands of years that in an overwhelming situation, when it's like a tsunami coming over us, right? The nervous system fragments a part of our essence and it becomes lodged as either tension or numbness in the body. And we
Mhm.
all carry some of that. Chronic tension is an echo of trauma. And so,
Absolutely. And I'm going to interject really quick.
yeah, yeah.
Do you think intuitively, like, because I always say, children and animals are closest to spirit. And I think when children come into physical and they go through all of this traumatic stuff, do you think there's still this intuitiveness that we know something is wrong, like this isn't right? Because I know, like you said, we do tend to internalize it and say, oh, there's something wrong with me, why my parents don't love me, or why am I being abandoned, or why am I being abused? But intuitively, I remember as a child, just having like doubts in my head, like, this just doesn't seem right, and I'm not going to do that when I'm older. What do you think about the subconscious versus the conscious acknowledgement of trauma?
Well, yeah, that's a big question. I don't know that we have the framework to answer the question. Looking at the first of all, let's talk about trauma a little bit before we and I'll get to that. Okay. So what is trauma? Like I said, it's misunderstood and it shows up in the body. So when we have these, particularly the developmental stages early on, there's this fragmentation. So, a part of our ability to tap into the subconscious is covered up. So we can't access that. What later becomes our shadow work, the shadow part, the narrative, the story. But you have to understand that trauma is not about the thing that happened. And that's really important to understand. Trauma is an event. What we talk about trauma is not what happened, it's what happened in me when the event happened. So there's the
Mhm.
event, there's what
True.
happened in me, and then there's the adaptation of that. So let's say I'm in a family where my parents are fighting and arguing, and they get a divorce, and I'm like 3 years old, and I've seen all this. And again, I said, something's wrong. And I immediately don't, there's no separation between mommy, me, daddy, me. It's connected. I'll talk later about symptoms of trauma, but so there's the event, there's what happened, and then there's the adaptation to what happened. So I become the helper. I try to help because I see something's wrong. So I'm, 3, 5 years old and I'm trying to help out. Or I become the confidant of one of my parents. Or I become the pretty one or the smart one or the good one. These are the adaptations that often become how we live our life. Becomes our, I become a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer or, there's no accident that these things happen. And so, but that's the positive side. But the negative side is I have to be that. So I work myself to death. I move all the time. I'm going, going, going. And right now, there's an epidemic of speed. Everything is speeding up. Technology is helping lead that. But in order to heal trauma, we have to soften and slow down. And if I had anything to tell your listeners, if you're having overwhelming experiences and having difficulties, it's not do more, do better, do different. It's soften, slow down, and go to the body because you can never heal trauma with talk therapy. Trauma is somatic, it's in the body. So we have to go to the body. You can't think through trauma, you can't talk through trauma. You have to feel it because what trauma really is very simple. It's unfinished past, incomplete past, cycles of past that are incomplete, not just personal, but familial, ancestral. There's legacy burdens handed down through ancestors, and there's collective. There's also historic trauma. Somebody who says, I'm not traumatized, you're just not paying attention because we're all traumatized. Everyone has trauma in their life. And, the beauty of trauma, and I think my life has been, an arc of that. The beauty of trauma is that healing the trauma is not getting rid of something. Trauma is not to suppress or get rid of. That only makes the nervous system on high alert. It's working harder. So when I already abandon a part of myself. I push down the fear. I push down the anger. I push down these sensations and thoughts that I have. So I've already abandoned it. And then I say, "Oh, I want to get rid of that." Well, you're abandoning a banding part already. So the nervous system says, "Uh-oh, danger, danger, so we need to protect this person." And so you just shut down. So healing trauma is befriending and turning towards the thing that happened and being able to feel the things that you couldn't feel at the time. Because at some point in space and time, it wasn't safe. That's why I say trauma is an intelligence. It's an amazing intelligence. But we have to understand and see the intelligence, and we have to turn and we titrate it. One of the things I work with people a lot is resourcing. How do I resource myself when I get overwhelmed? So titration is I feel into the trauma as much as I can without getting overwhelmed. And then I resource. I take a walk in nature. I call someone I love. I remember how great my grandfather was towards me, and then I go back and I feel a little more. So that's how we integrate. When I talk about trauma, it's an integration. It's a presencing. It's a bringing the event, not even the event, the outcome of the event into awareness and being able to sit with it and feel it. And that completes the past because most of us have our past in our filed in our future. So we keep thinking we're living into a future. We're not. We keep living into our past, our grandparents, our parents, our collective, all of that, we keep doing the same thing over and over again, thinking that it's going to be different. It didn't work then and it doesn't work now. We have to feel it. We have to allow ourselves to go into what's called the shadow, what Jung called the shadow area. And the shadow are those things that um, we don't want to acknowledge, and we certainly don't want anyone to know. Oh God, if they knew what I thought about, you know. I
Yeah.
interviewed Ram Dass one time, and we had an amazing day together. In fact, that interview is available on my We Earth Radio podcasts, and uh, he, he was talking about when he first met his guru, you know, and he was in India. And he was standing in the back and he thought it was all a bunch of hogwash, you know, and he was standing in the back and suddenly his guru looked at him and said, you were dreaming about your mother last night." And he goes, "Well, anybody could have said that." And then the guru says, "She died." And he's, "Well, yeah, she did die." Yeah. Spleen. It was a spleen. And all of a sudden he goes, "Whoa, if he knows that about me, he knows all those secrets I carry about my life, you know?" And
Yeah.
so really beautiful the way that, you know, and that's what led him on his path. And ultimately he, you know, honed it down to a mantra, "I am loving awareness." I can't tell you how many times he said that in our interview, in our time together, and over an afternoon of hanging out in his place in Hawaii. It was amazing. But I am so that was a constant reminder in what he did. He had that mantra. And when I learned to meditate um, in early 20s, I had a teacher, Eknath Easwaran. Some people may remember him. And he had me repeating the prayer of St. Francis, which I still love and do as a way to calm myself. Um, it's not positive thinking. It's really finding ways to calm the nervous system so I can increase my capacity to hold life. In other words, when I'm doing trauma work, I'm creating more space. So instead of life happening to me, it starts to happen, it moved through me. So it's not stuck, it's not unfinished past. So I'm living into presence. So unfinished past trauma uh, is destiny. Integrated past is presence. So presence, I integrate, and integrate means that I've I've experienced what was there to experience that got suppressed before. I brought awareness to it. It's not fixing anything. All I do is bring awareness to the part that I've suppressed, and in the awareness, it becomes present. It's no longer a story that runs me. Much of my life was led by kind of like having a sidecar. My story was over here, and I was here. I could talk about it, but I couldn't feel it. Took a
Mhm.
very long time. Many of us are so numb, we don't feel our emotions. And it's important, you know, emotions are in the body, feelings are of the mind. They work together. But, you know, for instance, happiness is a feeling. We think of it as an emotion. It's not an emotion, it's a feeling because it's based on something happened. I got the house, I got married, I got divorced, you know, whatever it is, you know, then I'm happy. But, um, as an emotion, joy is an upwelling. It arises in us as a movement. It's a movement. And that's what a human being is. A human being is just movement, energy, data, information. So when we're looking at, you know, healing trauma, we're looking at having enough space to see the movement, the information, and feel it and experience it so I get greater and greater capacities to hold and live a fulfilling life. So
I
just
love
a little bit
that.
of that.
No, I love
Yeah.
so much of that. And that actually did answer, the question is, like I'm sorry if I dummy it down because I'm definitely not as skilled and knowledgeable as you, but no, you're absolutely right. I love that. There's so many things, so many notes I wrote down that you had said, and I love how life happens through me, not to me. That was amazing. And the thing that really got me is that there's things that happen that we're not consciously we're like there's no ticker list. There's no this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's I love that you say it's more of this feeling, and it's kind of exposure therapy. Anything that we just if you think about it, I am, think whatever you're afraid of. Say you're afraid of snakes, and then somebody's like, "Hey, come on, let's hold this snake." And you don't get bit and you're okay with it. It's more of this acceptance rather than living in this fear and repression. It's like, okay, that's okay. But it is a step at a time too. You can't like overload yourself like with your story, and we're going to talk about a little, you feel like you're healing, and then what happens when the next event happens, the next trauma happens. So that's really it's this ongoing in life. Do you get better at it when the next event happens, when the next trauma happens? That's kind of my curiosity is, I lived in crisis mode and survival mode for so long, and the whole, like you said, the protection mode of my mind was just get through this event, just get through this event, just get through this one. And then to deal with all of that trauma later in life, I don't know that I did. I don't know if some of it's still in there that I haven't, acknowledged or talked about. So let's talk about when you have these events and then there's a continuum of when they happen. How do you get through that? Could you tell us about your wife? What happened with your wife?
Yeah, just to respond to what you're saying, though, one thing is that this is how our soul grows. Trauma is not a problem. It's, an opportunity to grow our soul, and it evolves not only us. When I heal something, heal meaning integrate something so it's no longer running me. When I integrate and heal that, it goes all the way back through my ancestors. Everything that's been handed down like that is no longer, because my ancestors are dead. They don't have bodies. Only I can do that kind of healing at a soul level, but it also ripples out to my children and the future beings. So anytime it may seem like I'm just doing a little thing healing mama, but it ripples out in both directions, and that's amazing. That's how we're going to survive as a species, is to learn how to grow our own soul. So, just to bring you up to speed, so then I went through military schools, through, you know, so elementary and high school. I was a brat. I was smoking cigarettes at 9 and drinking alcohol at 9. I was stealing. I stole cars, stole my father's car. Often they'd be drunk, so I'd go off on joyrides. Never got caught on that one until I went with a friend and he tried it out and we ran into the garage, and that was a whole nother story. Off to another military school. But anyway, so things went around. I went just to a year of college, and then I was about to be drafted, and I thought, I don't want to do that. So I became a Dharma bum. I was a Jack Kerouac fan, and I hit the road and spent a couple years in Europe, traveling around from one place to another, living in the middle of the Mediterranean, and lots of amazing adventures. That may be another book one day. Um, then the military caught up with me. I went in, but I had been really reading a lot and experiencing a lot in life. Um, and so I softened, and then I came back, um, and let's see, how old, I can't remember how old it was. At 80, age flows, but I did a thing called the S training back then. It was the S training with Werner Erhard. It became landmark education. And I had a really major epiphany. I came back from Europe and things were really in flow. I had interviewed with someone in a real estate company, which I had done, you know, I was very, my life was very full. At one point, I was going to college. I was, dr smoking 3 packs a day and drinking 2 pots of coffee. I was pretty wired. I was going to college, selling real estate, and I had a candle business. Um, but I went to this training and remember the first weekend walking out, and I was in San Francisco, very close to where my father had the bar, actually, now that I think of it. And I was walking through the streets and I had this thought, you mean I'm responsible for my own effing life? It was like this epiphany because I'd always kind of felt like a victim of life, that life was doing it to me. And that's when it started this thing of, wait, life can move through me. It's not happening to me. And later I extended that to looking through the lens of, and we all look through a lot of lenses, looking to life is happening for me. And that was really powerful. But that didn't happen until much later that I just could celebrate whatever happened. So you wanted to know about my wife. So I had an amazing marriage. She went through also the training. We were doing a lot of uh, growth work together. And in 1981, in Carmel, someone came into the house. She was raped and murdered in 1981. And we had a 4-year-old. And so suddenly I went through another major, major trauma. And I was a father of a 4-year-old, which actually probably saved me because I had to keep it together as much as I could. Um, Still drinking and lots of things going on. Lots happened between then and my work with organizations. I was a organizational consultant for 30 years, over 30 years, and doing a lot of different kinds of work, but always kind of on the growth cycle. And yeah, and so about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years now. Well, no, let me first go. Um, I moved to Canada because there was a lot of gossip. So I lived under slander and gossip that had been started by people who didn't know me, but were telling people that I had killed my wife because it was an unsolved mystery, and that I was a womanizer and had molested my daughter, none of which had anything to do with reality, but I was living with this. And this, a particular person who was a very high political person in the area that I was living in, took this on. She had actually been molested by her father, and interesting, I attracted several women into my life who had been molested or hurt as a child, which is part of how you know, I always say we marry our unfinished business,
Yeah.
because whatever there is that needs to be healed will show up somehow.
Yep.
And so, after 40 years and then 7 years in Canada to escape the gossip and moved to Canada, I get a call from the Monterey police saying, we're reopening the case on your wife's murder. And I immediately moved back to California and took a year and a half for the trial. They had gotten a grant for cold cases, they call it, DNA cases. And finally, we had the trial because the first trial was so messed up. They made every mistake they could. They lost the picture of him with scratches on his face. Uh, the parents lied and said he didn't have the scratches. Um, he was arrested on a traffic warrant, so they threw everything out that he had said because it was arrested on a traffic warrant, not a murder case. It was just everything went wrong. And so it was just kind of how it was. And the first trial was a hung jury. So it never was closed. It was called a cold case. So they opened up, and in 6 days, um, They laid out the case. They tried to blame me again. They brought that in, even called up people and said, we're looking at a murder case involving Michael Stone, not saying it was me, but implying that it was me,
Mm.
the defense of the person. So they finally put it away on absolutely, you know, conclusive DNA. The odds that it wasn't him, or that it was him, I guess, were 1 in 236 quadrillion to 1. So
Yeah.
that's DNA is weird that way. They have these huge numbers. In other words, there's no possibility other than it was him. And so he's serving life parole. Some of the gossip still went on. The person who was at the heart of slander wrote it in the newspaper because she was going to be a witness along with another woman I had married that started a lot of the story when I divorced her. Um, and I was excited that they were going to call her and put it into court because the lawyers would have had a field day with that because they weren't even around at that time. So, but the judge threw that out. But in the newspaper, when they talked about my story in the newspaper, they quoted her and said, "I don't know why the judge didn't listen to the women of Nevada County. We're all waiting for the appeal." That did me in. That just, I lost it for a week. I was in tears. I was angry. I was, you know, and then again, in the depth of just despair and like, when is this going to stop? Here I am now in my 70s, and this is still going on. And, uh, and I had this epiphany, I was so angry and I realized, I spent so much of my life defending myself. And then I had this experience. I was crying and I was going like this. Maureen, it was so much pain. My whole body was aching and I was crying. And I kept going like this. And, I don't know, I didn't mention this, but one of the things that saved me in the early 70s was I met Gabrielle Roth and I became a teacher of the five rhythms. So I've been studying the body for over 40 years at that point. And so when I was doing this, I went, what is this? I'm going like this when I'm, going through this horrible experience. I mean, I wanted to die, really. And I went like that, and I went, oh my God, this didn't start with the murder. This started as a 1 and 2 year old because my mother would put a pillow over my face when I cried.
Oh
And
my
suddenly the
God.
whole thing came back was this like this, protecting myself and defending myself. So 75 years later, 76, I don't know. Yeah, 76 years later, I realized I'd spent my whole life defending myself.
Wow.
And it just integrated and went away.
Wow.
So it's
Oh,
amazing.
it
And then
really
I
is.
started studying with Thomas, and yeah, and studying with Thomas Hubel. I mean, I've been with him over 10 years now, and I've been trained in not just individual but large scale trauma integration work. So now I work with groups, and I'm doing a new book coming up next year, and a year-long process of integrating trauma work into organizations. So that's the next thing that I'm now onto and committed to, and so we're doing a project with what's called the Pocket Project, which is an amazing NGO that works with trauma in the world. So yeah,
Oh, I love that. I just glanced at the clock and it's 11:11, which,
so
we
that's a
all
little bit of my story.
I just it's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, I mean, I could just listen to you like forever. What I love the most about your story and your willingness, my listeners all know I say the greater the pain, the greater the growth. And what I love most about your story is where your life experience, it's not even a story, it's a life experience journey you asked for, contracted for, I believe. And you never stop. You never stop being able to see that other side of the coin. And I remember when I had that same spiritual shift, it was like I was like you. I was always a victim, and I'd say, "Oh, next lifetime it'll be different." And then there was this, all of a sudden, this puzzle piece came in when I started meditation and I was getting answers to why I felt different and was different and saw things different than other people. And that's, I think that's the beauty of it, is when you're able to finally see that like when you said life happens for you, that's when I shifted that lens. Everything was so much less traumatic, so much less of a burden. And I really believe this, and I think you're going to agree with me. The biggest change when you have this sort of spiritual change and view of what happens in your life is you're wanting to share it with others. And for me, becoming, the coach and doing the podcast, writing my books, like that is the most healing thing that I have done, is when you no longer repress your story, you share it with others, and then you get this validation that you probably wanted your entire life. I know I did, from people saying, "Oh my gosh, I that happened to me too, Maureen. Thank you for writing about it," or "Thank you for having Michael Stone on your podcast and talking about it because it really helped me." Don't you agree that we sort of shift when trauma, when we start dealing with trauma, don't we shift to more of a service spirit? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's our natural instinct is to care and to be of service to others, you know. I think that's in our DNA, and we've lost it in this highly individualized world that we live in. You know, there's individualism, which is really important in our developmental stage. We have to have that co-regulation to self-regulate. That is individualism, I mean, that is individuation. Excuse me, that's individuation. Individualism, the rugged individual, the romantic individual. I did it my own. I did it my way. All of that is the product of a very traumatized culture
Mhm.
because we were meant to work together, you
Yeah.
know, and that's how it was. Tribes, you know, always that. If someone had trauma in a tribal uh, community, they would sit down for weeks with the person there and tell them how much he's loved and appreciated, and that, you know, uh, in the in Ecuador and well, the Quechua world, they have a word named Aini, which means sacred reciprocity. Everything is sacred reciprocity. And Quechua doesn't even have a language for separate for I. It's, you know, it's always us. So, you know, and that's what I work to do is create we spaces for people where they can heal, where there's a safe place. The problem is so many areas we just don't feel safe. People, you know, even in dying, you know, people, we've somehow decided that dying is a failure. It's something to avoid. We even have words, you know, he passed away. He's not with us anymore. He's dead, you know? He had a good life and he left a legacy of something behind, you know? Death is not something, death is, you know, I think Carlos Castaneda used to say, look over your left shoulder. If you ever have a problem, death is there to consult with, you know? That you know, that the source of joy is the embracing of death, but one of the biggest traumas we have, there's even a name for it. It's called terror management in psychology. That, you know, this fear of death, of disappearing, being gone, evaporating, but from a Buddhist perspective, I've been around people that died so beautifully, just I had a really close friend couple. They were Quakers, and they had a pact that they would never be a burden on each other. And they were, and the woman danced with me from 80 to 95. And in that time, and amazing woman, she was a freedom rider with Martin Luther King. Incredible. I have her picture on my altar still. And her husband Russ was got Alzheimer's. And but something in this pact that he had was able to say, okay, I'm not going to be a burden on you, my love. I am going to stop eating and drinking now. And for 10 or 12 days, he stopped. And I visited him a number of times, once on the day just before he died. And his eyes were so clear, and he recognized me. And he had a pretty serious case of Alzheimer's. But this promise and this love that he had was strong enough to know that he was not going to be a burden. So, you know, there's still a lot going on with Alzheimer's. That's a whole I worked with Alzheimer's patients, so that's a whole nother area. And dealing with the trauma of the people who love the people who seem to not be there. But there's a lot going on inside.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. You just
it's a
gave me a
wonderful.
Yeah, you gave me an idea to actually, do that. Have like a panel, loved ones of Alzheimer's. I also started in nursing and I worked in a locked Alzheimer's unit, and very
Ah,
difficult and very, just watching the difference between, all the different patients and how that development of our brain to the dementia and the Alzheimer's, as well as my grandmother passed from Alzheimer's. And I think what like you said, your friend who had the clarity, I remember it was Christmas Eve. Never forget this. And I went and saw her. She had to be in long-term care. I went and visited her, and she was deaf. So she had been deaf for since she was about 40, and she lived to be 94. And I remember going there, sitting with her in the dining hall, and they were playing Christmas music. And I said, this is what they're playing right now. She knew who I was. She started singing the song like she was herself, like 20 years prior. And I went and told my mom, I said, Mom, Grandma was as clear as she's ever been. It was so weird. And my mom never experienced it. My sister also had an experience like that. So Alzheimer's is a very interesting thing. So I'm so happy that you brought that forward. So I, oh gosh, I hate to even have to wrap this up, but wow, you gave us so much to go on. And I want to make sure that we definitely send everyone to you. I want my listeners all to go to you. So we're going to end this with our moment of just shining a light on everything that you're doing, where they can get your books. So let us know your website, what you offer, what kind of courses, that kind of thing.
well, here's my book, Traumatized, a Love Story, Healing the Wounds That Separate, Alienate, and Marginalize Us. That's my new book. And you can connect with me at welloflight.com, WELLOFLIGHT.com. I do a lot of online programs. I do therapeutic work, one-on-one and groups. Um, I'm on the faculty of the Shift Network and have been for years. I'm going to do a couple of courses with them next year on legacy burdens, and healing legacy, the things that are handed down through generations. Um, I have a very special year-long program. People would have to apply for it for people who are running companies or interested in healing trauma in organizational settings. They can reach out to me, Michael at welloflight.com. And, I will get back to you, not always too promptly because I get an enormous amount of emails. And I'll probably do another circle online next year. I didn't do one this last year because I had too many other things happening, and I like doing live things. But I will probably do another 4 to 6 month long online circle. So there's usually a waiting list. So if you're interested, you should do that before I even announce it because otherwise it'll fill up because I only take like maximum 18 people in that.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's a
I
few
I
things,
love
and
it.
let
I
me know.
love it. Your books
Yeah,
are all available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everywhere that you can get
I'm
books.
rewriting. I'm rewriting the original book, Living a Shamanic Way of Life, because I realized that. Modern science is finally catching up with the ancient wisdom. So I want to integrate the science into the shamanic now. So that's one of the books I'm working on, two books next year. So that's happening too. So I'm just getting started and I'm 80, so there's a lot on my plate. So
Oh God, you're so impressive. You're so impressive. I just love it. Yeah, no one's gonna
uh,
slow you down. You still got a lot more to do before you leave us. I just want to thank you so much for just for being here, for
mm,
your wisdom and also for being the person that you are and your willingness to go through all that you have gone through to be a service spirit. And I do believe that there's angels of different types on this planet. I really do. We all do different things, whether it's teachers or doctors or, motivational speakers or whatever it is. I think anyone who's trying to serve and elevate humanity, I just always applaud and appreciate. So, thank you. And I'm going
thank
to have all of these things for you, on your my gosh, I can't speak. I will have all of the contact information on your episode information so everyone can reach out. So I adore you. Hang in with me,
thank you,
Michael.
Maureen.
Listeners, I hope
Yeah.
you were just, I know you probably wanted another hour with him as I did. Oh my gosh, I was just enamored because as I'm listening to him, I was taking in so much. You think you never stop learning, and I think I've heard this is like almost my 200th episode, and I think I've heard everything, or I've heard all these different ways of saying things, but you never stop meeting people who give you a different perspective, and the law of attraction is just like Michael said, you're going to bring that information and those people continuously as you elevate and you grow. Like he said, it's the whole point is that your soul gets wiser and gets more knowledge and grows and elevates. And I feel like my soul elevated today just being in Michael's presence. So
Oh,
I hope everyone you enjoyed that. If you want to get a hold of him and you for some reason don't see the email address or anything, just you can always reach out to me. Also, I do self-love, self-confidence coaching. That's my most important thing that I focus on is learning that self-love, as that's what changed my entire spiritual journey was learning to love myself. And from there, you empower the things that you do in your life as a spiritual person and to grow your soul. So I'm at lifecoachmaureen.com, as you all know. So reach out to me for whatever reason, comments on how much you love Michael, where to get his book. I'll send you how to get his book, all of it. So I love you all for being here. Do not forget my books. My dog is more enlightened than I am. My dog is my relationship coach. And with the holidays coming up, I have two children's books. My dog Bexley is just like me, and my cat Grayson is not like me, teaching differences and sameness, acceptance and love of one another with our differences, as well as emotions are good, self-care is good for all those little ones. And this is for your little readers from 8 years old and younger, because those most formidable years as Michael was saying, the very first beginning is when we want to really insert all of that self-love and positiveness and confidence and mindfulness. And that carries through to our adulthood. And I know because of the clients that I coach, the undoing of what happens in our childhood, and as Michael knows, sort of undoing or accepting that trauma in the beginning years, really it manifests and it just keeps continuing until we deal with all of it as adults. So I love you all. If
Maureen,
you're, yeah,
can I say one more thing?
yeah.
A lot of people don't read these days, so I actually just finished the audio, so it's on Audible. So you can go to Amazon and get the either the ebook, the hardcover or soft cover, or also me reading the book, which was quite a challenge and in itself of doing that 4 months of in the studio. So I'm really happy to offer that for people also who, if you have Audible, you can just get it, I think, for free.
Oh, I love that so much. And sometimes people have, like I know my father has issues with his eyesight, so you can listen to it, get it as a gift for, family members who have difficulty with their eyesight, or just, go and listen to it. That way, when you're driving in your car, you can, listen to him and his voice. I think it's always great when the author does it. I did not do the audio myself on mine, and so many people said I wanted to hear you say it. So I I made the mistake of not doing that myself. So next time I will do that with my third adult book that's coming out. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for mentioning that. And yeah, other than that, guys, if you're in the Austin area, we do pop-up shops. We're having a holiday pop-up shop. At a big event that's going on December 12th in Cedar Park. So come out and see us. And that's for our dog boutique, My Dog Is Everything.net, where you can order all the fun stuff that we do. We make homemade treats, paw bombs, shampoos, lots of apparel. I have a lot of Christmas bandanas and dresses and all kinds of stuff for your furry babies. So I'm so happy that you are all here today and bless us with your presence and your ear and your mind and your openness and your spirit. So I'm always grateful. Leave those reviews because that really encourages me, and we get really good guests from those reviews, just like Michael. So yeah, just be kind. Let's be kind to one another. I want everyone to enjoy your holidays and your families. And until next week, please take care of yourself, take care of each other, and most of all, please take care of my furry babies. Let's, especially with the holidays, make sure that we adopt and we do not shop, because everybody wants to go get a puppy, and there are plenty of dogs in those shelters that would make an amazing gift. And they're more than a gift because they give you back 100-fold what you're going to get. So, yeah, please make sure you go to those shelters. Let's clear those shelters out. That would be my Christmas wish. Let's clear out the shelters of all the kitties and the puppies and give them all forever homes. So I love you all. Until next week, take care. Mwah.